This is a recording of my conversation with Zayd Enam, founder and CEO at Cresta. Cresta applies machine learning to capture what best performers do and enables all employees to become experts on day one. We talk about practical applications and impact. We end with Zayd's view on how machine learning will transform human activity. I'm talking to Zayd Enam, co-founder and CEO at Cresta. Cresta's technology learns by observing experts perform tasks and shares the learned expertise to help create experts on day one. Backed by some well-known VCs such as Andreessen Horowitz, Cresta came out of the stealth mode this year. Zayd, welcome, and please introduce yourself and Cresta.
Thank you, Chip. Thank you for having me on this podcast. My name is Zayd Enam, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Cresta. Cresta is a company that was spun out of the Artificial Intelligence Lab at Stanford. We're backed by Andreessen Horowitz and Greylock Partners. And what we really do as a company is build machine learning to help folks get really good on the first day of their job. So how do you help everyone be an expert on the first day?
So Zayd, I'd like to start a bit broader. So how can machine learning help humans enhance their capabilities and skills?
So I think the fundamental shift that happens with machine learning is, for the first time, you have software that can learn from demonstration. So historically, if you wanted to, say, build something like a self-driving car, you had to basically take a car and write a bunch of rules. So if this, then do this. If you see a particular road sign, then do this. If a particular tree shape, then do this. And what happens is these large rule-based systems become very brittle as you try to scale them. And it's very difficult to sort of be able to train any kind of real-world system with a set of rules. What machine learning for the first time lets us do is it lets us say, hey, for the first time, I'm going to train and program something by demonstration. So instead of writing a bunch of rules, I'm going to say, here's an example of a dog, or here's an example of a cat. And instead of writing a bunch of rules about what a dog or cat looks like, I'm going to give you 100 examples of each. And the system will be able to learn from those examples. What that unlocks for any kind of company or any kind of workforce is, right now, if you look at any kind of modern Fortune 500 company or any Global 2000 company, there's only a very small fraction of the organization that's actually building software. So the IT groups that are building software internally in the organization and building the software that the rest of the company uses. But with machine learning, what will be possible is that everybody in the company will become a programmer. And the reason this is the case is because every single time someone does a particular interaction, say it's a customer support agent handling a ticket, a salesperson having a conversation, a legal person completing a particular workflow, it's an example of training data for a machine learning system. With the right machine learning infrastructure and machine learning systems, those systems will learn from those interactions and learn how to sort of learn from the best experts in those interactions and be able to sort of combine and interpolate multiple interactions to be able to generalize to new use cases, new workflows. And effectively, everybody in the company becomes a programmer of this very large scale machine learning system that's learning how to do and augment all kinds of work that we do right now. And I think that will be the biggest and most lasting impact of machine learning on the modern company.
So I understand this is also what Cresta does. So what are the practical applications, or in what area do you see it practically applied?
Absolutely. So you see it applied to any kind of work where there's a high degree of repetition in the work and a very big variance in terms of the performance of folks that are very good and folks that are average. And so this is very common in front office roles. And what we really focus on is for revenue generation roles. So specifically sales is where we focus. And what we found in the sales use case is that you have basically salespeople where you have the Pareto principle, where basically 20% of your sales force is driving 80% of the sales, because your top salespeople are 3 to 5 times more effective than your median salesperson. And so if you can really build a system that can learn the lessons and insights from the top salespeople and distribute it to the rest, you effectively build a system that can improve the productivity of your sales force by 2x. It's a question for any sales organization is, how do you make every salesperson as good as your best? And the way we've managed to do this is that what we do is we build a software that collects the transcripts of conversations over the past year. We collect hundreds of thousands of transcripts. We train a model that takes those transcripts and looks at the outcomes of each conversation. So did this conversation result in a sale or did it not result in a sale? And then we're able to train a model that can effectively predict with high accuracy what is the behaviors that lead to success, and what is the behavior to lead to a successful sales outcome. That what would a best salesperson say in this situation, and we deploy that model in real time. Now you have every salesperson in the workforce has a coach that's sitting next to them on every call, and like an expert sitting on their shoulder that's guiding them through not only their conversation, here's what to say, here's what not to say, here's how to sort of take this call to the next stage, but also sort of coaching them throughout the week. Like, here are the things that you want to improve on, is that you have an expert sitting on your shoulder. And what that results in is that it's effectively every conversation that your sales force is having with their customers, or your agents are having with their customers, are conversations that are coached by your best salesperson. And that, as you can imagine, has dramatic impacts on the conversion and revenue for these companies.
Are there ways to project this expertise or expert advice when data is limited?
Yeah, when data is limited, that's definitely a use case for machine learning that the industry is still figuring out. And so there have been a lot of techniques that have emerged in the low data regime. One thing that we find particularly useful for use cases and deployments that we do with low data is bringing to bear industry best practices. So because we're able to identify across the industry what is really the best way to have an inbound sales conversation, what are the best sort of structure, the sort of best agenda for an inbound sales conversation, how many questions to ask, what are the type of phrasing to use, and we're able to deliver that in a more generalized model for companies that have less data. And so the companies are able to sort of get bootstrapped off a model that's more generalized, and then use that data and collect more data and more information as they're sort of progressing over time.
So you mentioned inbound sales. What are some other areas where you see this being applied?
So broadly, any kind of front office sort of application where you have a company conducting conversations with its customers, it is a place where you have a lot of repetition in the workflows and a big variance in performance. So you have anything from sales, all types of sales functions, right? So you have sales development representative workflows, you have outbound sales, but then also looking at support and service functions. So you have all kinds of functions where customers are interacting over support conversations, and you have agents handling those support conversations, and then also internal facing support. So you have IT service desks, these kinds of internal employee HR conversations where you have internal employees sort of fielding internal queries and conversations. All those places are really ripe for machine learning to be able to help augment and help people be experts on the first day.
Does the size of the company or the size of the specific team matter? Do you see the model performing better when you have bigger departments, bigger companies?
Yeah, absolutely. So we find that broadly working with teams of size at least 25 to 50 folks engage in a particular type of interaction is really sort of the sweet spot in terms of being able to demonstrate the biggest amount of value to the customer. Because what that really does is it allows enough data, enough sort of variance in the data set to be able to really hone in on patterns of expert behavior to train the models.
So what benefits do you expect companies to get from applying Cresta technology?
Yeah, it's a good question. And so I think especially in the time of coronavirus and COVID, broadly, like every sales organization, they're in a situation where they need to make the most out of every single lead that's coming in. And the way you make the most out of every single lead is by investing in your sales force. And so it's a question of, are your salespeople asking the right questions on the conversation? When a customer sort of has a particular objection, are they handling it the right way? As leaders, we need to make sure that we're training and effectively doing this. And so what Cresta really is an investment in the sales force to be able to effectively handle each conversation. That's a big impact in terms of being really effective and efficient there. And ultimately what that means is that you see a higher conversion on each conversation, where each incoming lead converts to revenue in a higher way. And so for customers that we see increased conversion, we see increased average order value, we see an increase in efficiency. So specifically an increase in the decrease in the average handle time, so the amount of time it takes to handle a conversation. So a reduction in sort of the amount of time to a specific conclusion.
So how companies start using Cresta? What does the implementation look like?
Yeah, Cresta integrates into the existing chat and call center telephony and systems. So what we're able to do is it's a simple API integration and able to ingest data with all the pre-built connectors that we have. We're able to ingest the historical last year's data. We're able to take that data and train our model in order to identify what behaviors led to specific outcomes. So the data that we ingest is conversational data plus the outcomes associated with each conversation. And then we train a model basically that takes that outcome data and identifies the behaviors and provides recommendations and suggestions. And then we deploy that in real time to a group of agents as a proof of value. And so what that whole process takes from start to demonstration of results, it takes us 2 weeks to deploy. And within 4 weeks, customers have a statistically significant result in terms of the impact of revenue on their teams. We basically, the way we do that is we have a test group and a control group, and we demonstrate Cresta's impact on the test group, how much more conversion they have, how much more revenue they generate, and able to prove statistically significantly what is the impact on the business.
This is very clear. Final question. What do you think is the full potential of humans becoming experts on day one, and specifically in which areas of human activity?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So this is what my PhD was on. What is the true impact of machine learning on work? And I think if you look historically, right, you go back 200 years, you look at agricultural work, so predominantly in the 1820s, so go back from 2020 to 1820. In 1820, you had huge amounts of agricultural work that was being done. And if you look at the productivity of a single person, so at the time in 1801, a single person could reap a quarter acre of wheat per day. And then 1820 was really when the first horse-drawn reapers really started becoming popular. And all of a sudden, a single person could reap 100 acres of wheat per day. So you had a 400x improvement in productivity of agriculture. And what that did is that unlocked a whole nother sort of era for civilization, because now agriculture could support cities and civilizations, and it could support sort of these mass sort of conglomeration of folks, because you had highly efficient forms of food production. And that completely changed society, completely changed how we sort of progress as a species. You go forward 100 years, you go to 1920. And in the early 1900s, it was really in the United States when the first sort of scalable manufacturing principles were happening. So it was folks like Henry Ford and the folks at GM that really basically built the first really scalable manufacturing principles and how do you build cars at scale. Because in early 1902, 1903, it took about 800 hours to build a single car. And cars were super inefficient. They were bespoke, they were unreliable, they were super expensive. Folks would commission them one-off, and no one could really afford a car. But what happened with these assembly line principles is that by the 1910s, 1920, a single car could be built in 2 hours and 30 minutes. And you had like 100, 200x productivity improvement in terms of being able to build cars. And all of a sudden, it unlocked the ability for cars to be available to the middle class, and a lot more people could afford cars. It changed the way cities were built in the United States, how folks could drive around to restaurants and all the things that they did, because you had these fundamental unlock in human productivity. And so like you see what happens is that every 100 years or so, we have these fundamental unlocks and step changes in human productivity, where for the broad range of work that folks are doing, you are able to unlock a massive step change in human productivity. I think the same thing is going to happen to office work. And that's why I dropped out of the PhD, and why specifically I'm so passionate about what we do as a company, is that if you look at office work really emerged as something that started in the 30s and 40s as folks were doing clerical work, more and more clerical work. And in the 70s and 80s, software and computers became more of a thing. But the way office work emerged is there's no reason it has to exist 100 years from now. So 100 years from now, the whole nature of that work might change. And for me, the perspective is that machine learning is going to change the way the office is going to work, because for the first time, you have software that can learn from the demonstration of office workers and learn how they do repetitive tasks and do all these kinds of work, and you can provide step changes in productivity. And so the way that sort of this kind of office work has emerged recently doesn't mean that it's going to exist the same way 100 years from now. And so I really think that what machine learning will allow us to do is allow us to be 10 times as fast. So we'll be able to take the kind of tedious, mundane tasks that we do as part of our day-to-day work and become really 10 times as fast as those, like a step change in the way that we handle things. And so if you're a salesperson, it's filling out these tedious forms in Salesforce or interacting and doing like tedious sort of logistical components of your work. Software will be able to abstract that and help you sort of take care of that for you. And it help people be 10 times as good. And what that really means is that for the very unique components of your work, that's not tedious or not mundane, for the really creative aspect of it, you can't really automate that work. But what it can do is it can help coach you from the wisdom of the crowd. What do the best experts on the team have? What is the expertise that they have? And so I really think that it'll help people be 10 times as fast and help them be 10 times as good. And it's a very simple sort of phrasing, but I think that's really the true impact of machine learning.
This was great, and look forward to it.
Me too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.